Serethi Voss counted 4 breaths in, 7 out. The scan table was cold against her shoulder blades, and the clinic smelled of reagent and recycled copper. Above her, Dr. Eolan Mars's diagnostic lenses cycled through spectra, green to blue to violet, casting prismatic shadows across the ceiling. The Kael exchange hummed beneath them, the station's rotation a vibration she could feel in her teeth. Kael Thyros leaned against the doorframe of the clinic, his prosthetic hand resting on the alloy surface, black fingers loose. He had swept the corridor twice before letting Serethi through the door. Old habits. The scar at his temple caught the clinical light, a thin white line mapping the implant his father had torn out. Iolan worked in silence. Her instruments painted Serethi's genome across the holographic display column, a double helix rotating slowly in blue-white light, each nucleotide pair rendered at molecular resolution. Routine. Iolan had mapped hundreds of genomes in this clinic. Exiles, refugees, merchants who needed to know what their parents had engineered into them before the birth records burned. Then Iolan's hand stopped. The helix kept turning, but threaded through its structure, glowing brighter than the surrounding code, were sequences that did not belong to any human genome Iolan had ever catalogued. They pulsed. The same blue-white as Progenitor architecture. The same frequency as the walls of the sunken archive. Iolan said, "Don't move." Serethi opened her eyes. The ceiling was tessellated with light from the holographic display. She could feel her binding scars responding, the luminous veins at her neck and collarbones warming, brightening, as if the scan itself were a conversation her body was answering without her permission. Kael straightened. He read Iolan's silence the way he had once read intelligence briefs by what was missing. Iolan said, "I need to cross-reference something." She pulled a secondary dataset onto the display. The data was old, classified. House Thyros weapons research, carried in the same corroded data chips that clinked at her throat. Research she had stolen the night she burned her temple tattoos and fled. She had carried it for 15 years. The cross-reference took 11 seconds. 3 sequences in Serethi's genome aligned with 3 schematics. The holographic display split into quadrants, her helix in the center and orbiting it. The architectural blueprints of 3 progenitor weapon systems. The heliovore array, the drift cannons, the seed. 3 weapons, 3 activation keys, all of them written into the DNA of the woman lying on the scan table counting her breaths. Kael recognized the schematics. Silent Choir intelligence training had included theoretical briefings on progenitor weapons. Theoretical because activating them violated the Quiet Edict, and because no one had ever identified a viable activation method. The method was lying on the table. The method had a heartbeat. Iolan said, "She's not an heir." Her voice was flat, clinical, the voice of a woman who had spent decades keeping her reactions behind her lenses. "She's a key, a universal ignition key. Every progenitor weapons platform in the galaxy is waiting for her." Serethi sat up. The scan table's surface was warm now, where her binding scars had pressed against it, a faint glow lingering on the alloy, like a handprint. She looked at the holographic display. She looked at the weapon schematics nested in the architecture of her own cells. Elegant, alien, 8,000 years old, patient. She laughed. It was not a kind laugh. It was the sound of a woman who had spent 20 years on a death world trading scavenged progenitor scrap for water rations, who had watched Marin Duskwell die whispering coordinates she didn't understand, who had felt her own body rewrite itself in the archive's light. She was now looking at proof that every moment of that life had been downstream of an engineering decision made by beings who had vanished before humanity learned to write. Kael's prosthetic hand tightened on the doorframe. The exposed joint mechanisms whined. His black fingers scored shallow grooves into the alloy. The hand his father had severed was now the hand that guarded the weapon his father would burn worlds to possess. He asked, "Who else has seen this data?" Iolan's fingers went to the corroded data chip at her throat. The gesture was small, automatic, the gesture of a woman touching the evidence she had carried for 15 years, the research that connected her old life to this moment. She said, "No one." Her diagnostic lenses shifted spectrum. Kael watched the shift. He had been trained to read involuntary tells by people who killed for a living. Iolan was not lying about the data. She was lying about something adjacent to it, a message already sent, a channel left open, a debt to someone who would come collecting. In the station concourse outside the medical ring, a young woman in indigo robes paused at a tea vendor's alcove. Tessith Karen's grey-blue eyes tracked the sealed door of Iolan's clinic. Her ink-stained fingers moved across the leather-bound notation tablet at her belt, recording in the microglyph shorthand that only she and one other person in the galaxy could read. The shorthand of Archon Valen Drace. Serethi's binding scars were still glowing. She could feel them now, not as pain but as signal, a frequency her body was broadcasting whether she wanted it to or not. Every progenitor system within range would hear it. The irrigation channels on Jessad had heard it, the archive had heard it, the weapons were listening. She asked, "Why was House Solabri destroyed?" Iolan's lenses cycled. Green, blue, the faintest flicker of red. She said, "I don't know." Kael saw the red. Serethi closed her eyes. 4 breaths in. She reached for 7 out, but her lungs would not hold. Her body had changed. The rhythm she had learned on Dust, Marin's rhythm, the count that had carried her through chemical storms and collapsed tunnels, and the slow starvation of a world that was never meant to hold her, no longer fit. Her binding scars pulsed once. The clinic went white. The holographic display flickered. Iolan shielded her lenses. Kael did not flinch. The light faded. Serethi sat on the scan table, eyes closed, luminous veins bright against her dark skin, her expression perfectly still. The expression of a woman who had just learned that she was built to end worlds, and who had not yet decided what to do about it. Half a galaxy away, in chambers thick with indigo shadow and the smell of old ink, Archon Valen Drace sat at his desk reading a message in microglyph shorthand. His ink-stained fingers, perpetually moving, perpetually writing on invisible surfaces, went still. For the first time in years, the Archon's hands had nothing to say. He read the message again. 3 weapons, 1 key. A bloodline the galaxy had spent 12 centuries trying to forget. He did not reach for the secure channel to the Regent. He did not summon his clerics. He sat in the dark and held the silence like a man holding a lit fuse, calculating exactly how long he could wait before it reached the powder.